Hello and welcome to the Life Well Led podcast, brought to you by Untapped Consulting. On this show, we have conversations aimed at uncovering the art of leadership. Whether you're seeking to lead yourself, your family, your team, or an entire organization, we're here to explore what it looks like to do so in a thoughtful, nuanced way. And we are glad that you are along for the ride. I'm your host, John Elliott. I am joined by my co-host and eldest son, Grady Elliott. And today we have the privilege of talking with Delandis Beck, or as Grady knows him, Coach Beck. Delandis currently serves on staff with Fellowship of Christian Athletes and has just come up on 5 years of serving in that capacity. He is the founder and director of Illinois Basketball Club, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we get into our conversation here. Member of the Vineyard Church here in Champaign. Even more importantly, husband to Jamie, his wife. Father to Aiden, Riley, Kingston, and Morris. And he's actually made an appearance on the show already, or at least by name. In the preview episode, I asked Grady who the best leader he knew personally was. And Coach Beck was his answer. And so if he's the best leader Grady knows, and I can understand why he would say that, we thought, well, we better get him on here and let him share, his leadership secrets with us. So Delandis, Coach Beck, so glad to have you on the pod today.
Thanks so much. Now that was the question was best leader other than your dad.
I think that was assumed.
Yes.
Yes. I think that was assumed. We'll assume that.
Yes, right. That's right.
All right, Grady, we'll let you kick off the interview with a question that you're excited to ask your coach here.
All right. So you've shared with our basketball team, you want all of us to be men of Christ, and you are too. So I was wondering, how has your growth in your faith led to your growth as a leader and a coach to kids like me?
For sure. Yeah, well, I mean, we have to understand that Jesus Christ is the ultimate leader, right? He's the ultimate coach. He's the best example that we have. And as I dig into scripture and investigate the life of Jesus, I just see so many different ways that we see Jesus being an amazing leader, the way that he serves people, the way that he cares for people, the way that he loves people. I venture to be that type of leader. I try to follow that example that Christ gives us in scripture. I think there's a lot of different things that we could point to with that, but one specific kind of example comes to mind when it comes to just the leadership principles that we can gather from his life. I think about how Jesus is just living life with his disciples, doing everything very intentionally, never in any sort of a rush, always moving at his own pace, always grounded in prayer with the Father. And you see him have these conversations with the people that are following him, his disciples. And we see the account that's given in it's in Matthew, it's in Mark, it's in Luke, where Jesus asks his disciples, who do men say that I am? And his disciples give a couple of different references, and then one disciple says that you are the Christ. And once Jesus sees that they finally have the revelation of who he is, he then says that for the first time, he begins to describe to those disciples that he must, go to Jerusalem, how he must suffer, how he must be rejected by the elders and be crucified and be raised to life again. And I just take different leadership principles from Jesus Christ because he showed that, hey, in order for these people to follow me, they must first understand who I am and who I'm called to be. So as I coach, people like you, Grady, it's important for you guys to know who I am, like what's the thrust behind me. Mm-hmm. And that helps you guys better understand the decisions that I make. Yeah. So when you guys, say, well, coach, what are we doing after the game? And I say, hey, we're having chapel before the game or after the game. Oh yeah, that makes sense because I understand the thrust that's behind Coach Beck. So yeah, just to answer your question more pointedly, as I discover more and more by reading the Holy Scriptures, discovering who Jesus is, it just helps better inform who I am as a leader. I say all the time that there's no better coach than a Christian coach. Let me just say it that way. And because the principles of the kingdom, they work. This is the way that God set up this place that we live called Earth, and it comes out in different ways. We see Jesus talking about things like not showing favoritism. I think it's important that a coach doesn't show favoritism. I think it's important that a leader doesn't show favoritism. When we hear Jesus say things like "love people the way that you would want to be loved," or treat people the way that you want to be treated, I think that's it comes out in our leadership capacity as well. So yeah, I believe Jesus is the ultimate coach. He's the ultimate leader, and I think if more leaders would follow his example, we'd see better leadership in all arenas, all around our world.
Yeah, well, that resonates with me certainly, and that's a big part of why we're excited to be a part of IBC, and I'm excited for Grady to be under your leadership. Is because you have that vision for, hey, I want to be the. It's almost like you're saying, whatever it would look like for Jesus to be a coach of a travel basketball team in 2025. Yeah. That's how I want to coach.
Absolutely. And obviously I'm very flawed. I'm not perfect, but that is the aim. That is the goal.
Well, that's where I want to go next, right? That's the aim. That's the goal. And that's compelling. But, we're not Jesus, right? We're not perfect. I coach with IBC too, younger level. And I feel that tension of, okay, that's who I want to be. Yeah. That's the direction I'm pointed. But gosh, competition, sport, it can be disorienting. There's all kinds of landmines out there. There's all kinds of potential distractions, yep. Right? And yes. So if you'd be willing to share, that's your aim. But gosh, take us inside of the struggle there. What's hard for you at times about trying to be that sort of leader?
For sure. Yeah. I think what you touched on it, just competition. I think competition has an innate ability of pulling some things out of us, sometimes that we didn't even realize was down in there. In the heat of battle, in the heat of competition, the desire to win can sometimes draw on some parts of you, the fleshly part of your nature, that you would rather not come out. So yeah, that tension is absolutely always there. And it's funny because I was talking with some coaches just this morning concerning a similar topic. And it's important to note that, just because we want to be Christ-like and then God honoring in the way that we compete and the way that we coach, that doesn't mean that we don't want to win. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes that can get lost in that conversation of, oh yeah, we want to be Christ-like and we want to honor him, and winnings and losses don't matter. No, we still want to win. Wins actually do matter, but there's a way that we can do that in a way that honors the Father. So yeah, there's always a tension there. I don't think that tension ever really goes away. I don't know if it does. I need to read a book or listen to a podcast or something, but I haven't discovered the way to get rid of that tension yet.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of something. On season 1, we had a mentor of mine, Ryan Berg, who's former D1 basketball player and has raised kids who are now playing college sports. And we asked him, what kind of pickup basketball player do you think Jesus would be?
A pickup basketball player.
And he is thoroughly convinced that, Jesus would have been just the scrappiest, most competitive, knee pad wearing type, just getting after it. Yeah. And there's nothing inconsistent with that and some of those traits you talked about in terms of servant leadership and just caring for people. And absolutely. I think there's a way that competition can coexist with essentially the fruits of the Spirit. It's just, it takes a lot of wisdom and discernment to figure out what that looks like.
And I think where you see some traction there is, again, when we look back at the life of Jesus, like when we look at the rhythm of his life, we would often see that Jesus early in the morning would steal away to a solitary place and he would spend time with the Father. And then he'd go about his business and he'd encounter people on his travels and he would have a relationship and he would serve and he'd perform miracles. All the while, his competitors, if you will, the religious astute of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, right? They're competing against him.
Yeah.
And he never misses a beat. He never misses a beat. He's always prepared for the conversations. Now, granted, he is God, but he's also 100% man. So, again, just to see the rhythm of Jesus as it relates to our leadership, just the importance of, and I feel I'm even convicted by it, even as I say it, making sure that I spend ample time in prayer so that I can download more of the DNA of the Father, so that when I get to encounter awesome young men like Grady here, I can be more of an example of Christ in his life.
Yeah. It's also interesting I've never thought of, the Pharisees, religious leaders as sort of his competitors, but there's some truth in that. I mean, that's the main, ideologically, that was the main position he was battling. And it's interesting to think about how Jesus was willing to actually lose some battles to win the war. I mean, the cross is the ultimate version of that. And, I just see elements of that even in what the culture you've cultivated within IBC, where we're playing the long game. And there are times and moments where we have to be willing to at least appear weak in order for a bigger end. But again, it's a world where it can be hard to remember that at times.
Well, especially in a world or in a culture where almost everything else is going in the opposite direction.
Yes.
Right. We understand that the kingdom of God is opposite of the kingdom of this world. So to be inundated, completely submerged in a culture that's doing different things, it could be very challenging for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. So our last guest on the pod was a guy we all know here, Trent Meacham.
Yeah, it's my guy.
And we asked him a question. We said, what is the most encouraging trend you're observing in youth sports and the most discouraging trend? And we'd be interested in hearing your answer to that question.
For sure.
From the unique angle you look at this, as someone who's very much immersed in this, coaching, leading an organization that's trying to be different, but is still operating in the same world as a lot of these other entities. So what would you say? Most encouraging thing you're seeing out there and the most discouraging thing for you?
Yeah, for sure. It makes me think back when we first started the organization back in 2020, and the very first season we were getting ready to embark upon. We had our first parent meeting the week before COVID shut everything down. And kids weren't able to play. And that bothered me. It upset me. And that was really kind of the first launch of Illinois Basketball Club. Was we just had about 15 kids that would come to our house, and we'd keep our distance as much as we could because we didn't know what COVID was. But we just trained kids in our driveway outside 3 days a week for about 9 weeks, just because I felt like kids need to be out here doing something, being active. So I say all that to say I'm encouraged by the fact that kids are playing. We go out on these weekends and there's tournaments happening all over the place, in big cities and small towns. There's kids that are out there and they're playing the game, specifically of basketball. And there seems to be some just genuine energy and excitement around the sport. So that's really exciting to me. And that's encouraging that, hey, I think that this basketball thing, I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. On the flip side of that, I'd say that kind of the discouraging side of things is that's almost encouraged a lot of bad coaching to enter into the arena. And by that, I mean, let me speak specifically to travel basketball. There are just countless teams, countless coaches who are just popping up with brand new programs, brand new teams, seems like every single year. and there's no sort of credentials, no sort of education, or anything to where these individuals have to go through anything to start a program. I would say every Tom, Dick, and Harry can start a program. And because of that, I think while all these kids are enjoying playing, I think a lot of these kids are playing in not so ideal playing environments. And that's because of, honestly, I'd say bad coaching, but specifically bad leadership. So, yeah, I'm encouraged by the fact that kids are playing. But the negative trend that I see is that because so many kids desire specifically to play the game of basketball here in America, that there's a lot of individuals who, for have different motivations, whether it's they're disgruntled from the last team that their child played for, or the school in their community didn't hire them as a coach, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of different people starting programs and gathering kids and taking them out and playing games. And I just don't see a lot of these kids getting what I feel they need.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that resonates. And the first part, the positive, I don't know that gets enough attention. Travel sports can kind of get a bad rap for different reasons, some of them justified, but when we think about in the grand scheme of activities that our kids could be involved in or things they could be doing with their time, it could be a lot worse than travel sports.
Absolutely.
Being out there, being active, exercising, learning teamwork, competing, having to endure setbacks. I mean, there's a ton of good that can come from that, and
100%.
does. But to your point, having adults, leaders, coaches in place who can help young men and women pull the right things out of that, that's where you see a lot of variability out there.
Yes, yeah, and I don't think anyone would push back on the idea that, man, sports, there's a lot of secondary benefits to playing sports, right? Like, and I think you mentioned a few of them. Just learning how to participate and cooperate with others, learning how to get along, learning how to take instructions, learning how to handle being under authority, all these amazing benefits that will serve these kids long into their future if they learn to grab those things when they're available to them. But yeah, we're seeing some problems, and you see it, Coach. I mean, you coach, Grady. You see it. You're playing. Mm-hmm. We had even just this past weekend situations where
I was thinking the same thing.
Competition, it pulls some stuff out of you, and things can get physical, and all sorts of negative outcomes can be experienced.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like in the heat of the competition, stuff comes out of you. Like that championship game, there was some stuff that some of our guys have never done before, but just in the heat of that battle, you don't know what's going to happen. Like your instincts take over, you want to win, and that happened in the championship. So
yeah.
That's life experience.
Which again goes back to the leadership that's in place, because those are impact moments. Those are moments where these are lessons that can be learned. What can we pull out of that experience that's actually going to make you a better, not only basketball player, but a better young man? Or is it the opposite? Are these things not talking about? In fact, are these things maybe sometimes being encouraged? I've
celebrated.
I've seen some coaches encourage that type of behavior. It's, it all starts with leadership, for sure.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to flip the script a little bit here. Delandis, we're going to give you an opportunity to talk more specifically about what you're building with IBC, the distinct culture there. But I think it actually could be fun. Grady, you've been a part of this as a player for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
You've also been a part of some other teams and entities, and even in other sports. So maybe let's let Grady speak to it. What's your experience within Illinois Basketball Club been like, and what feels different about it, maybe from some of the other things you've experienced?
I mean, it definitely feels incredibly different from other things that I've done. I think there's two probably main things that stick out. One of them is just the organization level. With IBC, it's like the consistency is always there. Like people show up for practice. We practice 3 times a week, every week. Like that's something you can count on, something you can rely on, and that's really nice. And also what we've been talking about, like leadership. I mean, I've already said, like Coach Beck, you're one of the best leaders in my life, and that's just because like you try to connect with us. Like you genuinely want a relationship with each of us, and you establish a trust between us where there's some room on both sides. Like you hold us accountable, and I mean, even sometimes you let us like change some stuff, which I think is really cool and something that I don't see every day. Like we'll be in a game and one of our players like, hey, I don't think this is working. Let's try this, and you're gonna be like, all right, that's a good idea, and then we do it, and it works, and it's cool to see that there's stuff on both. You're giving way to both sides to have a voice.
Yeah, that's
Coach, what's it hearing him speak to that? I mean, are you hear that and think, well, that's good. That's what we're shooting for,
yeah.
or we're shooting for something a little different, or how, what's it like to
No,
hear that?
absolutely. That's exactly what we're shooting for. Obviously the basketball stuff matters, right? So that's the basketball stuff is a little easier to come by. So when you mention your experiences with other programs, there's a lot of people that know basketball. There's also a lot of people who think they know basketball, but they don't. But there's plenty of people out there that know basketball, guys and gals who played either in high school or in college or at a high level. But I also say that just because you played at a high level doesn't mean that you can coach. But there's plenty of people that can teach you how to shoot a jump shot or how to dribble a basketball or whatever those fundamentals may be. What's the difference? And I'd say the difference has to be just the kingdom. I wanted to create something where the kingdom of God would be represented in this arena. And I think that's something, I'm not going to say it's invisible, or not invisible. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist anywhere else, but I know at least around here, I don't see the kingdom of God represented in the space of specifically travel basketball. And I'd say even broader, even basketball or sports in general. So that was to your question, John. That was what the Lord impressed upon my heart as He began to lay out the vision for this. I remember it back in 2020, right as we were rolling into 2020, as He began to just show me what He wanted me to do with this and what He wanted us to do with it. That was really the thought that I had in my mind that He gave me was, let your kingdom come and let your will be done in basketball as it is in heaven. What does that look like? What would that look like for the kingdom to be advanced through the game of basketball? And I just learned this here recently, and I haven't researched this much, so forgive me if this is incorrect, but I actually learned recently that the game of basketball was actually originally created as a missionary tool. It was actually created initially as a missionary tool to be able to go out and evangelize and share the gospel with people. So when I learned that, I've just been kind of on charge for the last few weeks, and I've been kind of sharing it around a little bit. But yeah, what does the kingdom look like in the game of basketball? That was the question I was trying to answer.
Which is such an upside down countercultural way of thinking about it,
Yes.
right? Because I would say what's normal, and of course we do this in all phases of life, but is to enter a kingdom and say, okay, what can I do here to expand or grow my earthly kingdom and my earthly power and influence, and I'm going to use this to make myself bigger, stronger, more impressive to the world. And what you're describing there is the exact opposite of that. You're saying, no, we got to, step one is laying all that down and saying, what does it look like to express the heavenly kingdom here within this realm? And it's going to look different. It's going to sound different. It's going to feel different. But that's actually the magic in it.
Yeah. I love what you said there. Let me lay all of these things down. In other words, let me deny myself. Right. Yeah. Jesus said, if any of you would be my disciple, you must first deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me daily. And I've been there. Right. I'm challenged by that every single day. But I've definitely spent previous seasons of my life trying to build my own kingdom.
Yeah.
And around again 2020, that was around that time when the Lord was really, really getting a hold of my motivations. I've been a Christ follower since I was 11 years old, but it wasn't until recent years where God really got a hold of my intentions and got me to understand the importance of laying down my little toy kingdom, my little toy
Yeah.
throne that I was trying to sit upon, and take up my cross, which is sport ministry. And as I'm carrying this cross, following Christ, following his example, trying to duplicate what he's set before us.
Yeah. Well, as a coach in the program, it's really helpful to be a part of a community of coaches and leaders who are thinking that way, right? Because in any given moment, we're weak, we're frail, we forget that. It
Yes.
becomes about our own kingdom. And so it's just nice to be around some other leaders where we're reminding each other of what you just said.
Yep.
Because those reminders are needed. And I don't know if there'll ever be a time where they're not needed. Yeah. And so it's just cool that that's part of the community. All right, there's a question that we've been asking each guest on this season. So Grady, I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, so I know you give us, our team, a lot of wisdom, and I've heard a lot of the great things you have to say, but maybe you could share with the audience some advice you'd give to your 14-year-old self.
Oh boy. There's a lot. I don't know if we have enough time here. 14, that's middle school, right? So middle school is such a weird time for young people.
I mean, it's your team.
It's your team. Exactly. Things are changing, your body's changing, your mind is changing. So many things are changing. And it's just an awkward time. You're trying to figure out who you are. I think the biggest thing I'd probably tell myself is to discover who the Lord is for myself personally. Like, get a real relationship with Jesus Christ, even at the young age, and gain the understanding that I wasn't created for my own glory, but I was created for his. I think so often as young people, we're so motivated by things like looking cool or how other people are perceiving us or what others think about us, the way that I dress, the way that I talk, the sports that I play. We're just so concerned at that age, and even beyond that age. But I just remember this being in middle school, just being so concerned with what other people thought of me, and I just didn't know at that time that I was created to be different. It goes back to our previous conversation about just this upside down kingdom. We weren't meant to necessarily fit into the way things are done here in this earthly kingdom. And the scripture that comes to mind, it's in Isaiah 42. And it essentially talks about how we were created for everyone that's called by his name. We were created for his glory. So just being reminded of that simple truth, it kind of goes back to the age old question, like, what's the purpose of life? Like, why was I created? I was created, Grady, you were created for God's glory. And he wants to get the glory out of your life. And we all receive different callings to different spaces. My calling, at least for this season of my life, is sport ministry. But it's so that God gets the glory. And I wish I understood that even when I was 14, because it would help me to just not worry about certain things that I was worried about at that time in my life. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. One of the great revelations in adulthood for me that you don't, like when you're 14, for me, sounds like for you, a lot of adolescents, your whole life is oriented around like fitting in, being normal in terms of whatever normal is at that moment with your peers, being cool, what have you. And it wasn't until well into adulthood that I realized, to really live according to the purpose for which I was made, you've actually got to be weird.
Peculiar.
Yeah. I mean, in the right kind of ways, right? I mean, there's all different types of weird.
Yeah.
But the key to living out your purpose on one level is to be weird in the right sorts of ways. And I think when we're young, when we feel weird, it's like, well, something's gone wrong here. Get back in line,
Mm-hmm.
But to live the life God calls us to live, there's a weirdness to it. There's a peculiarity to it, as you said. And it's I hope that Grady and my other kids figure that out sooner than I did.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And it sounds like you're saying a similar
Yeah,
thing.
and it's okay, right? It's okay to be different. Like, be confident in that, knowing that, man, the creator, my creator, the master of all things, is the one who's made me this way. Versus just being indecisive and just unsure. Like, you can be confident in that. Stand in.
That's right. It's going to bed at night knowing if I'm good with him, I'm good.
That's right.
People can think whatever they want to think, but there's kind of that audience of one.
And don't get me wrong, relationships matter, right?
Yeah.
The way we interact with others matter. We don't want to be necessarily out on an island to where people aren't able to experience the Christ that lives in us, right? So there is some tension there as it relates to how we manage our relationships. It does matter.
Yeah. And I think that makes it even like more important to surround yourself with good people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, as you were talking about earlier, like what you're doing with IBC is like kind of going the opposite way of a lot of programs. And that can make it harder sometimes because everyone's telling us we got to do this thing, but we're trying to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So to have people there to support you and go along with what you're saying and believe the same things as you, I think is really important.
100%. Yeah. Your community is huge for all the reasons that you just articulated. You said it perfectly, Grady, for sure.
Yeah. If I ever write a book someday, the title might be The Right Kind of Weird.
And if I do, first, people.
Grady, there's going to be at least one chapter on the role of community in that, because I think you're absolutely right. Awesome. You have to sort that out with other people who are trying to figure out what the right kind of weird looks like in God's kingdom. All right, we'll get you out of here on this. Final question. Grady's asked you for advice you give to your 14-year-old self. I want to give you the opportunity to give some advice to the sports parents who are listening out there. In fact, I suspect that many of the people listening to this episode, have children playing in one sport or another. And in my experience with youth sports, the kids are really the problem. When things get sideways, it's often because the coaches and the parents involved, they're typically the ones to blame. And so just, again, given the unique vantage point from which you look at this whole world of youth travel sports, if you could just give it one piece of advice to parents out there in that world, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I'm not sure if we have the time for all of this, but try to enjoy the process. I think we, as parents, so often we get caught up in thinking that our kid's going to be the next big thing, or desiring our kid to be like the next big thing in the sport, which I'm not saying that's wrong to have that desire, but I think just now that I'm about to graduate my firstborn son who's going to play in college, which is like, hey, that's the dream for most people that are doing this. Now that he's achieved that, I can honestly say there were times, especially when he was in middle school and like early high school, where I was just really pushing really hard. And I get it, because they do need to be pushed. But sometimes I failed to enjoy just the experience of just being with him and us just doing something together, because I was so laser focused on, hey, you said you want to do this. You said you want to play in college. Okay, well, we got to do all the things right now. We got to focus and we got to lock in, which you do. But again, sometimes you're blinded by that ambition. I'd say that, number one. I'd also add, for those who are interested in their child playing at the next level, I would encourage them, and it sounds cliche because you hear it so much, to really focus on the academics. Like, pay attention to the kids' grades, make sure they have a good, solid GPA, because it actually does really, really matter, and it does really help their chances, especially in today's college culture, college athletics culture, with specifically with basketball. it's becoming increasingly harder for high school students to get recruited straight into a four-year school. Division II, Division I, even more so. So I can remember a conversation that I had with a D2 coach down in Jacksonville just this past summer. And he was telling me a little bit about how they approach things concerning kids and their GPA. And he really just broke it down to me. He said, hey, and I'll give you guys the example. Grady, if you're the college coach, Grady, and your dad, John, is recruit number 1 and I am recruit number 2, and we come in the door and we essentially, for all intents and purposes, we are the same athlete. We have the same skill set. We do all the things well. We have the same deficiencies. We are clones of each other. But John has a 3.5 GPA and I have a 2.0 GPA. He's going to take John, and here's why. Every college coach, especially at the lower levels, which if we're honest, most high school athletes, if they are able to play basketball in college, it's not Division I. Division I is a whole different arena, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to play if they're going to play college ball, it's at one of the lower levels. That they're pretty much a general manager, like in the NBA, and they're trying to move numbers around and they're trying to make it all make sense. They can take a kid like John as a recruit and they can find him academic money, which means they don't have to take their athletic money out of that pot that they have to bring John in. But if they choose me, my GPA doesn't constitute me getting academic money. So now they have to use more of their athletic pot to bring me in. So again, if they have to choose between myself and John, they're going to choose John. And I'm sure there's other examples of this and there's other reasons why, but that's a very clear example of why your GPA really, really matters. So parents, pay attention to your kids' grades. Start in middle school. Start forming those good habits in middle school.
Yeah, it's good. And again, it just takes my mind back to the IBC mission, developing the whole athlete.
Amen.
Right. And obviously there's a physical basketball piece of that, but there's an academic, intellectual piece. There's spiritual, there's a social, relational. And it's been a refreshing environment for us to be a part of. I know I speak for Grady and just being really thankful for you, for IBC, the other people that we've met through it. And we're excited to continue to be a part of it and hope that, what we're doing with IBC can, maybe be a catalyst of sorts, right? Because again, we come back to it. There's so much opportunity in the world of sport for developing young people in holistic ways, but it requires the leaders involved to see that opportunity and to embrace it and to help young people embrace it. And so,
for sure.
That's what we want to be a part of, and we're thankful that we get to with IBC.
Yeah, I'm grateful for both of you guys being a part of it, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on. And Grady, we'll see you in a few hours at practice.
That's right. Grady, come ready to work.
I got you, coach.